My mother was and is a senior healthcare challenge, and I want to tell you a little bit about her story today. I begin with God's word from Isaiah 46, verses 3 and 4. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, all you who remain of the house of Israel, you whom I have upheld since you were conceived. I have carried you since your birth. Even to your old age and gray hairs, I am he. I am he who will sustain you. I have made you, and I will carry you. I will sustain you, and I will rescue you. These verses make me think of my mom and her long journey to joy and how God has sustained her through 84 years. Her journey has not been easy. Sure, there have been moments of laughter, good days, and nice nights with family and friends along the way, but it seems she has always carried an extra burden in her life. On Saturday, February 11th, 2017, I was called to my mom's apartment in Brandon by my older sister, Sandy. She told me that Mom couldn't get out of her lift chair and needed some help. Being called for a quick assist was not out of the ordinary for any of us kids. My mom has suffered from heart disease, diabetes, and a host of other ailments for many, many years. So I drive over to my mom's apartment. I knock and enter and find my mom's husband standing in the kitchen. He said she can't get out of her chair. I walk past him to the living room and find my mom unresponsive. She was in a curled up fetal position, just shaking like a leaf on a tree. I had seen my mom in poor situations before, but I had never seen her quite like this. I honestly thought she was going to die right there in front of me. I called 911 and gave them the necessary information while they dispatched an ambulance. The paramedics arrived, stabilized her, placed her on the gurney, and then lifted her into the ambulance to head to Sanford. It would be another day in emergency. I made the calls to my sisters and told them where we were headed and updated them on her condition. The hospital staff used the next 4 days to stabilize her blood sugar levels and to treat a very bad cough. She was released from the hospital the following Tuesday and ends up spending the night in her apartment trying to sleep in that same chair that she had been rescued from a few days earlier. The very next day, my mom needs to be rescued from her chair again. This time my sister Tina steps in and somehow manages to get her out of the chair, forgoes the ambulance, and takes her to Sanford on her own. RSV, pneumonia, and blood sugar levels that are all over the place again. She's on oxygen and IVs, and we stopped guessing as to what her future might hold. On Sunday morning, my mom had been readmitted into the hospital and had been there for several days already. She couldn't sleep, and she didn't have an appetite, and she was just a plain mess. So on Sunday morning, February 19th, Mom has been in there for 4 days, and I'm at church with my family and realized that I don't have my cell phone. I discovered later that my sisters were trying frantically to reach me. So needing an update, I decided to run over to the hospital after church to see how dear old Mom is doing. I bop up to the 4th floor. I see a sign on her door, "See nurse before entering room." I was thinking this had to be some kind of a quarantine issue. So I go to the nurse's station and I ask about Diane. The nurse tells me she's with her kids and a chaplain. And I said, "Well, I'm one of her kids, and why is there a chaplain in there?" She said it's because her husband died this morning. I enter the room and find my brother and one of my sisters and a chaplain with my mom. At this point, I'm thinking that if poor health hasn't taken this old lady out, this has to be about the last punch she can take. Not quite. Mom was 82 years old at the time. She was in the hospital for a variety of ailments, and now her husband and primary caregiver had just died. Living alone wasn't going to be an option, but that didn't seem to really matter at the moment. We had to plan for her next step. We had no idea how much hospital time was left, but we found out rather soon. She was released from Sanford 2 days later, on a Tuesday at noon. She was to be admitted to Good Samaritan Society Luther Manor for rehab by 2 p.m., the same day as her husband's visitation at the funeral home. Tuesday afternoon at Luther Manor is when the good news started. 2 of my sisters delivered my mom to Luther Manor just before 2 p.m. I was to pick her up for the visitation by 4 p.m. When I arrived, I found my mom in a room being attended to by a CNA named Zane. More good news. This young man knew her situation and treated her with amazing compassion and kindness. He calmed her down in less than 2 minutes from the moment that he met her. I could immediately see the physical and mental change in my mom as Zane spoke to her and prepared her for the afternoon at the funeral home. Then I whisked Diane away to meet family and friends so she could begin saying goodbye to her husband. Exhausted, with no idea of what her future would bring, I took Mom back to Luther Manor after a long afternoon at visitation. I wheeled her into her room, and then this army of staff appeared like angels from heaven. They arranged for a meal in her room, sat her down in her lift chair, and my mom says, "It's so nice to be home." That statement really hit me because my mom had barely spent 30 minutes total at Luther Manor. I think she finally realized at that point that God was in charge. He was in charge of everything. Her statement to me sounded more like a prayer. "Lord, I am at your mercy." The funeral on Wednesday went well. It was a gorgeous day in February. Mom was able to be wheeled to the graveside as the day's services ended. She held up remarkably well and had an energy I hadn't witnessed in years. Now it was back to Luther Manor for formal admission and some real rest for my mama. I worked with admissions at Luther Manor because my siblings thought that I might have an in because I was employed at Good Samaritan. It turns out that where I worked was irrelevant because I realized very quickly that they treat everyone the same, respectfully and professionally. Thankfully, I had all her personal and financial information readily available because of all the applications I had filled out over the previous 2 years seeking affordable housing for my mom and her husband. Mom's diabetes was out of control. The nursing staff seemed to take it as a personal challenge to stabilize her blood sugar levels. After 2 weeks, they were able to teach her some diet discipline, get her meds in check, and then rehabilitate her physically by making her use muscles she hadn't used in years. The turnaround was miraculous. My mom's strength, soul, and spirit returned. God had provided her an oasis in the form of a skilled rehab facility with a sign in front that said the Evangelical Lutheran Good Samaritan Society. She had made it through the desert of fear and uncertainty by the grace and mercy of God the Father and the hands, feet, heart, and mind of Jesus Christ in the form of Good Samaritan staff. I reminded the staff gathered in the great room at National Campus 2 years ago, when I originally presented this story, that they should not think for 1 minute that they didn't have something to do with my mom's recovery. Some of them had a hand in providing health care and quality policies that were put in place to heal her. Some of them provided the technical infrastructure that allowed her medical records to be quickly received and updated. Some of them had a hand in training and guiding CNAs like Zane in how to handle special patients like my mom and do so with compassion and care. Some of the employees dealt with the complexity of Medicare and Medicaid that allowed my mom to be admitted so quickly, regardless of how much money she did or did not have. Some of them have had to make difficult decisions over the years that kept the Good Samaritan Society viable and effective in more than one uncertain time in healthcare history. All of them made it okay, more than okay, to pray for a new patient who was scared and had no idea what the next day would bring. To all of you, tireless workers and caregivers, leaders and managers, and to God our Father, I say thank you. Thank you for saving my mom, a woman whom you did not know, yet you came to her aid anyway. You didn't check her bank account balance or whether she attended a church or not. You cared for and healed a person. And that's just what we've come to expect from a Good Samaritan. A quick postscript about Diane. She would be just tickled to know that her face is on a screen this size in great room. She won't know about it, I promise. My mother has been blessed to live in an assisted living center in my hometown of Jasper, Minnesota, these last 2 years. And while her health continues to be a challenge, I want all of you to know how you helped extend a precious life and how you were able to bring joy to an old woman who none of you know. Her name is Diane, and you let her know that she matters.